It's Sunday night. This is Warren Sprouse. You're watching the Bible Forum. We're here every Sunday night from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time. Been doing this for the best part of 20 years. We are recording this for posterity. It goes up on YouTube, and that way you can watch it during the week. Each of these videos are then cycled around on the website where you are now at thebibleforum.net. There's a screen in the bottom right hand side. You click that and it'll just cycle last week's show for you all week long, because I know some of you don't stay up late enough to watch it. Others have other things to do. But this evening is a very unique time because it's the 17th of January 2016. We're not going to do this again. We have a lot of things we're going to talk about tonight, not the least of which is the politics that are going on. We have some issues regarding religion and church. I mean, this is a Bible forum. We're going to be talking about your life. You know, why is your life not working all that well? Don't blame God for it. We're also going to be talking about the State of the Union address that never happened. We're going to talk about the preacher in charge, not the president. I didn't think that there was a speech given. I thought it was a sermon. We're going to look at lottery winners. We've got some lottery winners this week. We're going to look at that in light of, or in concert with, your commitment as a Christian and as a church. What would you do? We're going to also look at why pastors quit the ministry. A study has been done that unveils some of the issues underneath. I've entitled this one, Why Pastors Should Quit the Ministry. And we're going to talk about Pastor Abedini. If you've been paying attention today at all, what you are learning is that our State Department has announced that Iran has released a number of our people, not the least of which is Pastor Abedini. These folks had dual citizenship, many of them. They let them go yesterday. Some of them have already landed here in this country, been reunited with their families. They were kept in prison. They were abused beyond anything we know about. We won't learn about that until it's done. Last week, Iran poked us in the eye by capturing a couple of our boats and the sailors on them, and they gave apologies and all the rest of it. We're still sorting that out. Some of us are old, and we think that people who apologize to the enemy ought to be punished. That's not what we do, but this is a different time, isn't it? Iran needs us. They need our money. They mock us. They scorn us every day and in every way. We take it. And then in the end, they release our people, they go through the motions, and we get on TV and we announce that we've won the war. That's how it's done these days in the 21st century. I hope that you are on our mailing list. Every Saturday I send out an email. It looks like this, has my picture on it, me pointing my bony little finger at you, and some pictures and stuff down at the bottom and some writing on the back, and there's all sorts of things that kind of give you a clue as to what we're going to be talking about on this Sunday evening. If you'd like to have that, just send me your email address. Send it to thebibleforum@gmail.com. We'll put you on the list. Don't sell it, don't trade it, don't give it out. And I don't send you anything except this once a week. There may be something important that comes up that you really need to know. I might do that. I've done that once in the last 18 years. It could happen again. If you have a pastor, maybe you could send your pastor's email address to me. I have an email, a newsletter that I send out to pastors once a month. This is the one that went out in December. This is the ministry we call Rod and Staff. It's a ministry dedicated to the strengthening and encouragement of God-called pastors. This month I wrote an article on food for the soul or the flesh. And then I also wrote a little short article entitled Life Follows the Preaching of the Word of God. These are just encouragements to pastors in the midst of all that is going on in their life and around them. And I just struck home this week because of the study that was released by Lifeway relative to pastors. They looked at 734 former pastors, all of them Southern Baptists, but pastors. There were some Assemblies of God. There were a few Church of Nazarene. There were a few Lutherans in the mix, and asked them questions about their ministry, and if they left before retiring, why did they leave? And it's very interesting how all of that sifted out. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. You have not signed up for the Bible Institute. Shame on you. You need to go to the website and click the link that would allow you to sign up. The website is BibleInstituteofCharleston.org. If that's too much to remember, you can just do it from this website, thebibleforum.net. There's a link on the front page that will allow you to go there. We have in the works 10 lessons, 10 subjects. There are 5 to 6 to 7 40, 45-minute lectures in each subject. But these are the 10 major Bible doctrines, the basic Bible doctrines. And we work through them systematically. We're working through bibliology and then theology proper, Christology, the doctrine of Christ, and we go through all 10 of them. Some of you are already in the process. You've been working on the first one, bibliology. When you finish that, you need to sign up for theology proper. But so many of you have not signed up. There's probably a dozen or more that I know of personally who told me they were interested and they would like to do this, and I haven't heard a word from you. And it's no rush. You don't have to do this on my time schedule. It's an online Bible Institute. You can do this anytime. You can do it now. You can do it next week, next year, 10 years from now. It doesn't really matter. It might matter if I'm dead 10 years from now. It's a 2-year process. If you stay with it and go through each of the courses in sequence and you only have a few weeks in between each class, it'll take you 2 years to work through these 10 subjects. You could take 20 years. It's up to you. It may be the Lord will provide somebody to come along behind me and just take all that's over, and you can just keep going. But you go to the website and it'll explain how this all works. You get a video each week. You watch the video. You can take the test at the end of the class. You don't have to. You can write the essay. You don't have to. You do all of that successfully, you get a certificate of completion. You don't do it, you get the information. It's very simple. We're going to be looking tonight at why your life is not working. And there are people in this world who clearly their lives are not working well. But we don't want to blame God, do we? And so we'll look at some of that sort of thing. We're going to look at the State of the Union address, as I mentioned to you, lottery winners and that sort of thing. Right now we're looking at the events that have occurred since we got together the last time that might be interesting to us as Christians and to you as Americans. We have Israel, who is now scrambling to counter the new European Union decision that has recently been made relative to the settlements there in Israel. Now, this is an ongoing issue relative to the West Bank. The West Bank consists of those territories that Israel won fair and square in battle in 1967. This was the infamous Six-Day War that was foisted upon Israel. They didn't ask for it. They didn't start it. A number of Arab nations got together and came after them, and they defended their property, their territory, and their lives, and in the process, they took control of all of the territory that now is in the area that we consider to be Israel, plus the Sinai. They turned around and gave back about 60% of it. They did keep the West Bank, that territory east of Jerusalem, but west of the Jordan River, as a barrier against Jordan and other groups that might be coming in that direction. The world doesn't like that, and they have tried to punish Israel for that. The same world that has, by virtue of war, taken their own territory and enlarged their own borders, and not willing to give back anything. But they think that Israel ought to do that. The European Union has just voted, and they will now continue, as they say, to unequivocally and explicitly make a distinction between Israel and all the territories occupied by Israel in 1967. The draft continues to say that we will consider further action to protect the viability of the two-state solution, which is constantly being eroded by new facts on the ground. That's a nice way of saying that Israel is building apartments and other things in these territories, and more taking them as their own. And the European Union and the world at large, I might add, is not happy with this. The draft says the recent decision by the EU to label settlement products is not seen as a boycott of Israel, something that the European Union is opposed to. But you see, they do label, if it comes out of Israel from the West Bank territory, they label it, this came from the West Bank. And that way you know, if you don't want to buy it, this is a good thing. We had a State of the Union address this week. Our president broke from tradition. I don't know if you watched any of this or not, but he did not recognize any of the guests that were there, including his own wife. He did not outline the State of the Union, which is the purpose of this meeting. He did not speak as to colleagues and voters. Rather, he spoke to all of us as a scolding father. He was preaching. He was not informing. You understand preaching. You've been with me for a while. You know what preaching is. Preaching is a propositional style. I have on my website, thebibleforum.net, I have a picture of myself. And the picture is me pointing at you, because that's preaching. It is propositional. It proposes a response from you. You need to know this, and you need to do this, and so forth. The first observation that I had was that our president was not fulfilling his responsibility to present the State of the Union. He was more interested in focusing on the larger issues of his program and your failures than he was specific policies that might have been accomplished or are projected for the future. He did mention the issue of climate change, as well as Vice President Biden's initiative to find a cure for cancer. And if you were watching that exchange, maybe you had the same response I did. I thought that the Vice President was not expecting that. It did not look like he knew that was coming, or that he was up to speed as to what his responsibility would be. And the president had to goad him into responding. Right, Joe, you're going to do that, right? Oh, yeah. I didn't think he was serious about it. It didn't come across well. He is tempted to assuage the nation's fears that terrorist attacks around the world may be the beginning of a major world conflict. He did acknowledge that the Islamic State posed a serious threat, and he went on to dispel the heightened fears of further attacks. He mentioned guns only once, and he only did that in passing. As I said, the guests were not recognized. Guests that included a Syrian refugee, an American soldier who stopped a gunman on a passenger train in Europe, along with some other fellows. He did not recognize one of the first women to complete Army Ranger School. He was intent on spending his 50 minutes or whatever it worked out to being, telling you all the things that were wrong with the way you think and feel and believe and how right he is, and we need to get this thing turned around. He did go on later to blame Fox News and talk radio in general, as well as the New York Times, for pushing Americans to occupy two different realities. He was talking to Destin Sandlin on a YouTube show. Now, I have yet to get a call. And I've been doing my show longer than Destin has. But he called Destin. He does a show called Smarter Every Day. And on this show, the president said, quote, "The splintered news media is at least partially to blame for the polarization of American politics." Not the president, not his party, not the opposition party, not anybody who is involved in the process, but you, the listener, the voter, the citizen that's out there. He says that, quote, "The problem is that when we get our politics, a lot of it has to do with the fact that our media is now splintered." You do know that 30, 40 years ago that was not the case. We only had mainstream media, the alphabet guys. That's all we had, ABC, NBC, CBS. If you didn't get it from them, you didn't know anything. But now it's splintered because there are other people out there talking and telling you the same sorts of things and a little different, and so on and so forth. And he says some people are just watching Fox News, and other people are just reading the New York Times. And so they start with a common baseline of facts, he said. And clearly they're starting poles apart. They're not starting at the same place. And if we could just solve this problem, was the subtext, maybe get rid of talk radio, then we wouldn't have all of this division. Can I get an amen? Hillary's got a new problem. Larry Klayman, who is founder of Judicial Watch and Freedom Watch, has been trying to get the government to take physical control of a thumb drive reportedly held by Clinton's lawyer. There is a lawsuit that has been filed by Judicial Watch. It's been filed under the Racketeer, Influenced, and Corrupt Organizations Act. We commonly know this as RICO. It's a case against Bill and Hillary and their family foundation, alleging that the foundation is more or less a criminal enterprise. Now, you won't get that from the New York Times. You're not really getting it from Fox News all that much either, but they're more likely to do it. See, that's the difference here. An enterprise designed to specifically, Klayman says, to benefit the Clintons. He said this has been part and parcel of the way they have operated. And he's arguing over Hillary Clinton's use of a private server while she was Secretary of State. Now, the case was brought by Klayman, says, quote, "Multiple acts of racketeering activity by travel in interstate or international travel for the purpose of bribery, money laundering, and obstruction of justice. These actions were done," he goes on to say, "with the specific purpose of defrauding plaintiff and others out of hundreds of millions of dollars in donations." He alleges, for example, that Hillary, quote, "granted a waiver to Victor Pinchuk and his company, Interpipe Group, as an exemption from U.S. congressional sanctions against doing business with Iran." He alleges that this was, quote, "a quid pro quo for bribes disguised as donations made to the Clinton Foundation." He said the company then, using the wires and mails and other illegal means, fraudulently donated $2.35 million to the Clinton Foundation. The judge, receiving this information, didn't say no. Stay tuned. It's going to continue probably for years. Hillary's got another problem. There's a new movie out. I don't know if you've seen it. You've certainly heard about it. It's not going to help her. It's called 13 Hours, The Secret Soldiers of Benghazi. It's a story of the Benghazi attack told from the perspective of men who were actually there on the ground and going through this process. Men who were not permitted to help. I told you the story back in 2013. A book entitled Benghazi, The Definitive Report, was written by 3 men who were there. Men who were part of the security team. They tell the story hour by hour, minute by frustrating minute. And we have now been 2 years or more with all sorts of testimony and information that has come out. And not one thing has been learned new. Nothing the movie reveals, nothing Congress has learned that we know of, is substantially different than what was in that book. All we do know is that our president is reported to have spent many hours that fateful night into the night, playing cards. Playing a game called Spades. Maybe you're familiar with it. Playing with his Secret Service body man in an adjacent room. How do I know that? The body man said so. He was on news. He was interviewed. And that's what he said. And this is what our president was doing while men were being assaulted with military weapons, ultimately sexually abused and killed in horrible ways. Something that took at least 8 hours to accomplish. These men who wrote the book and tell the story claim that they were less than 30 minutes from that location. A rescue team in Italy was no more than 4 to 6 hours away. A government report that was issued, official report, insulted these men and their families and you, telling an alternate story to cover this thing up. They're telling us, or were telling us, that there wasn't anything they could do. Now we've got reports leaking out that imply that there were men in aircraft on the way who were turned around. The government maintains there was no stand-down order, but it's becoming more clear that that's just parsing words. You don't actually have to say those words to get that result. And so far, the people involved are saying, I never said that. That's what we did when we were 8 years old on the schoolyard. I want to suggest to you that this would never have happened with Democrat Franklin Roosevelt. This would never have happened with Democrat Harry Truman or John F. Kennedy or Lyndon Johnson. I doubt Bill Clinton would have been so paralyzed at this moment. It is a pure case of politics over lives. Put these men in harm's way, then leave them there to die, because you must preserve your precious reputation. What am I talking about? I'm talking about the story in this book that explains what Benghazi was all about. It wasn't, no ambassador lived there. This guy that was killed, the ambassador, was a kind of a traveling ambassador sort of a thing. It was, we didn't have anything in Benghazi, just an outpost. But these men said that we were running guns out of that outpost to fuel and arm the people who were trying to topple the Syrian dictator Assad. Something that was not legal. Something that wasn't even smart. And to do anything at that point to draw attention to what was happening there, to send more troops in to shut that attack down and protect our people, would have put the President and the State Department's head, Miss Hillary, put their political reputation in jeopardy. So men had to die. And the question is, what do we come to? What have we come to? Did you win any money in the lottery this week? $1.6 billion. Claim 3 people did. If you had been a lottery winner, you wouldn't be watching this program right now. You would be holed up with your accountant, your attorney, your business agent, your investment counselors. You'd be hiding out from your friends and your family, and you would be planning which island you would move to or buy. My question to you is, should Christians buy lottery tickets? I think many do. Pastors do. Few there be, it seems, who have any moral compunction against it. One winner was willing to go on national TV to brag about winning. Said that he would be giving his church some of those winnings, some of that money. Question: how much? Would he be tithing? Would he be giving 10% of his gross to the Lord? We're talking 10% of approximately $300 million. Yeah, that's what I said. 1.6 billion, and each one of them are going to get about 300 million. Got to pay taxes. Yeah, it's not a good place. What would you do? And would your church take the money? Here are 7 reasons not to gamble with your money by John Piper. We're going to talk about 7 biblical reasons not to sin by gambling. But we have 7 reasons not to gamble being offered by a noted preacher. To go after something for nothing is to short-circuit God's command that a man needs to work to provide for his family. Genesis chapter 3. It's part of the curse. It's a requirement. It's a responsibility. To take a risk with household wealth on the luck of the draw. To seek after something for doing nothing. To weigh out the practical, social, psychological pitfalls. John Piper says it's spiritually suicide. I think he's actually right. The Bible says those who desire to be rich fall into temptation, into a snare, into a lot of harmless desires, and plunge themselves into ruin and destruction. 1 Timothy chapter 6. He also says it's a kind of embezzlement. I think that's a good one. Because all you have belongs to God. All of it. Faithful trustees may not gamble with a trust fund. They have no right to it. It's not theirs. The parable of the talents say Jesus will take account as to how we handled the money that he has allowed us to get, to have, with the understanding and the idea that it's his. Everything's his, and he'd let you have this. John goes on to say, number 3, that it's a fool's errand. Well, there are a lot of fool's errands. That's not a really strong argument against it biblically. The odds of winning are nearly 176 million to 1. Why would you bother? He also says, number 4, the system is built out of necessity that most people would lose. That goes without saying. It preys on the poor. It really does. They're the most vulnerable, and they get the advertising pointed right at them. Number 6, he says there's a better alternative. He doesn't say there's a better biblical alternative. He says we're teaching our people, our children, to be fools. And number 7, he says, for the sake of quick money, the government is undermining the virtue, our virtue, without which a society cannot survive. So if I win, what do I do with the money? I would encourage you not to give it to me. Don't give your winnings to this ministry. If I know they're coming from lottery, you're going to get it back. I don't want it. Jesus does not build his church on the backs of the poor. Need to pray that God's people would be so satisfied in him that they would be free from the greed that makes us crave to get rich. There's much more that could be said on that subject. It's a very sensitive subject, in large part because it is the 21st century. In large part because the church is fragmented. And the standards that were everybody's standards 100 years ago aren't even the church's standards today. I'm in the process of writing a book about the evolution of Christianity over the 2,000 years. And it becomes very easy to see quickly that generation after generation after generation does exactly the same stupid stuff. And that each one gets worse than the one before. And I think the devil doesn't have to be all that smart. He gets a new crop every 20 or 30 years, and they're susceptible to the same problems, to the same issues, to the same temptations. And you see them coming back around. They have different names and they attack in different ways, but they're pretty much the same. We're going through another phase. I would encourage you not to be the one that gets tricked that easily. We have a lot of other stuff to talk about tonight. I want to talk to you about our president's investment in getting us to stop blaming Islam as the problem. We'll do that next.